I believe application of knowledge is power. So if you can read all the books and listen to all the podcasts and watch all the videos you want to, but if you not are not applying that knowledge, if you're not actually taking action, then you are essentially doing nothing, really. You need to apply that knowledge. You need to keep going that. I know that first step is always key, just like educating yourself, but you gotta take action. And your faith is gonna be key to a lot of this because it's gonna help with when times are tough in this business and when you're facing a lot of struggles or choices where like you don't know what to do, your faith and is going to be a key factor into all this.
This is the Fit Investor Podcast, where we talk about how to live a more holistic life of being fit, not only financially, but physically and faithfully. We'll be joined by experts in all these areas to share their experiences and actionable and practical tips so that you can be a fit investor too. So now let's join our hosts, Cale Delaney and Brenna Carls.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Fit Investor Podcast. I am your host, Cale Delaney, here with Brenna Jaws Carls.
And Megalodon.
Brenna Megalodon Carls. And today our special guest is Mr. Vinci Sevilla Jr. So he's an active real estate investor and entrepreneur holding a portfolio valued in excess of $22.5 million, consisting of long-term rentals, short-term rentals, and large multifamily. He's also the founder and CEO of Getaway Haus, technology and data-driven real estate investment and management firm. The national portfolio specializes in top-tier short-term rentals that currently operates across 4 states and are actively expanding across the U.S. He's also the co-founder of Invest Capital, where they take on large multifamily syndications and help investors maximize their returns. He is also Christian and new father. And Vinci, welcome to the Fit Investor.
Hey, Cale and Brenna, thanks for having me. Super excited to be part of this podcast. I've been listening to you guys for quite some time since y'all first started. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a listener, Brenna. We have a listener.
Yeah. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
But yeah, so I like I mentioned to you offline here before we get started, like I'm pumped to have this conversation because you and I have like identical stories when it comes to at least our investing career. And so I think it's going to be like talking in the mirror here for a little bit. So that'll be cool.
Absolutely.
Why don't you take us back a little bit though, and give us a little bit more background on who you are, where you're from, and how you got to where you are now.
For sure. So I'm over here in Southern California. First started in real estate investing, really with my first investment or my first property. It was actually at a house hack out here in Southern California in Riverside. And Riverside has about a couple universities in it or nearby it. And so when I first house hacked, I decided to buy a property within a 3-mile radius from one of the big universities out here. And yeah, I was living in one room and renting out the other rooms. And I would say that may not be ideal for some folks, but at 23 years old, for me, that was like the best way to house hack. I didn't even know what house hacking was. For those who don't know what that is out there listening, house hacking is essentially just finding a way to live in one portion of your property and renting out the others to help pay for the mortgage or pay for, or even make money for some folks. And essentially you can do so in a single home or even a multifamily, like a duplex, triplex, or quad. And yeah, it started out from that. But I didn't really learn about real estate investing until I would say 2017, about 2 years later. And I decided to start my long-term portfolio in Chicago and I started buying a few properties out over there. But when you're making between 200 to 500 a month per property, and then after year 2, you need a new roof, there goes all your cash flow. And then from there, but I started studying a lot of personal finance. My wife and I had gotten married around that time, shortly after buying my first few long-term rentals. And then we decided to jumpstart our finances. We were able to pay off $147,000 of student loans within 14 months. And that kind of kickstarted our journey up until to zero, starting around very March 2020. And we all know what happened around that time. And so a lot of people came to me and asked me like, hey, you paid off all these student loans. Don't you know that the government is going to try to forgive you for these?
Right.
Or don't you know that you could have put all that money into stocks right now, into the next cryptocurrency or the next Tesla here? And 2020 was wild, as you guys know. During the pandemic, everything was going up, but we had decided like this was the best choice for us, and we were pretty much gung ho about making sure that we were starting from a point of financial strength.
Right.
If we were going to continue investing in real estate, my wife and I, we wanted to make sure that we were coming at it with a position of financial strength to invest. When you're investing in a property and you don't have your own house in order for finances, there's no way that you're going to do well in this business, is how we saw it. And so we began looking into different types of real estate investments afterwards. And in late 2020, began to hear a lot of things about short-term rentals and Airbnbs. And that's when our journey started, listening to a lot of YouTube and a lot of podcasts. Obviously, there isn't as many now as there is now back then, but we decided to start looking at a few markets. And one of the first markets we looked at was Joshua Tree, because we were local. We were about an hour and a half away from Joshua Tree, Yucca Valley, 29 Palms area. So I actually began looking out there. And then I went to a local real estate meetup. And in that local real estate meetup, someone told us about the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. And I'm like, Tennessee? I'm like, I can't even point that on the map for me. Like, where is Tennessee? And what is this about this great Smoky Mountains? Began to do some research and due diligence and decided to start looking at both those areas, both those markets, Joshua Tree and the Smokies. And when we were throwing offers left and right, kept getting denied early 2021 until finally we actually got 2 offers accepted pretty much within 24 hours of each other at the same time, one in the Smokies and one in Joshua Tree. And my wife looked at me. She's like, hey, we have a baby on the way. At that time, she was only a few months pregnant. She's like, are we sure we want to do this? And I'm like, there's no other better time than to do this than now. The fact that we're having a baby coming, I think this is the time for us to pretty much skyrocket. And so, yeah, we accepted both offers. We went through the whole due diligence and whatnot. And I want to thank Short Term Shop for helping us with our first property in the Smokies. And then, yeah, we started from there. So I think I just said a lot right now. So I'll take a pause and let you guys add it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And number one is that getting 2 offers accepted at once in 2 of these hot markets, which I don't know the size of those properties or whatnot, but I'm guessing neither of them was relatively cheap. So taking a big risk, your first venture into it, one's kind of local, one's whatever, 2,000 miles away, no experience in short-term rentals, baby on the way. That's huge. So what was it that gave you the confidence to really make that move and take that quote unquote risk?
I think the fact that I was going to become a father soon, and the fact that she was pregnant made me realize. And at the same time, I was actually I was finishing up my MBA.
Okay.
And I was like, it was an online MBA, but I was like taking courses, doing my W-2. And I think realizing that this could be something different. This could be something new for us. That could be changing our lives forever. Definitely want to call it like a newborn business. Right? We got a newborn and we got a new business coming in, and we didn't know how to handle both of those. But God willing, he gave us insight to push forward through it, and thank God that we were able to push through and go through it. And now I tell people all the time, I wouldn't really recommend it to others to do this, because there was a lot of stress and there was a lot of conversations my wife and I had during this entire time while we were building this business. And it's not going to be easy. It is not easy. And if somebody tells you short-term rentals is passive, you're talking to the wrong person. So yeah, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy decision, but yeah, I think just knowing that my daughter was coming was the biggest motivator for us.
Do you have both properties still?
Yeah, I do. Now going through both of them with the lender, Brenna, you can chime in about this, but the lender was not happy the fact that we had 2 properties going on at the same time. And yeah, they were both under our names. So that was when my lender first asked me about it. She's like, oh man, I wish you didn't tell me about this. But yeah, we still have both properties.
That's great.
And probably a very nice interest rate compared to today's rates.
Yeah.
I don't even want to know. It'll make me cry.
timing. No, it's good timing for sure. But so no, it's awesome. So two at once, you get the baby on the way. And like you said, the big thing for you, your motivator was having the baby and her being your why. And that's something that we always talk about is, and I think you're in the same agreement is, you need to have a strong why when you're getting into a venture, whether it's the real estate or some other type of business or whatever. You have to have a strong why when you get started because things are going to be challenging. Things are going to be stressful. And if you don't have that, it's going to be very easy to throw in the towel when you come across those obstacles. Yeah, that's crucial. And for me, it was a very similar thing. It was the birth of our youngest that kind of set me going as well. And like I was saying, we got so many similarities. Like you started out with two at once. You didn't even know where the Smokies were. Same with me. Like I heard about it from a podcast, didn't even know where it was. And then drove up there. And then I didn't do two all at once, but I did one. And then immediately after we closed, we went on two more at the same time. So we had three within whatever it was, 3 months or 4 months. So very similar there.
Vinci, did you start out self-managing both of them right off the bat?
I did, yeah, because I didn't know anything else. And others said, hey, you got to self-manage. I was like, okay, all right. So how do I do? But yeah, I went through a lot of YouTube videos and pretty much I think one of the best things that we did was connect with other people who were in that same market locally. And Josh Tree and the Smokies, we got two different time zones. I got two separate cleaners, two separate handyman, like two separate teams. That was a bit of a challenge, but that's what helped us get kickstarted into scaling because we knew that we could do this really from anywhere in the world. I don't call it work from home. I call it work from Wi-Fi. But being able to connect with the team online, virtually, and then getting your boots in the ground in both markets was definitely challenging. Yeah, I think self-managing is definitely the way to go. It was just a little difficult, but that's when that kickstarted for us. And we actually began co-hosting shortly after. And then we began expanding to other states and other markets after.
How many short-term rentals do you have now, like single family wise or residential?
Residential, we have 9 active short-term rentals at the moment. However, I do have two other commercial properties under contract or underway right now. One of them is a campground in West Virginia, close to the entrance of the New River Gorge National Park. We're going to be building, it's about 5+ acres, and we're going to be building geodopes. We're going to have Airstream trailers. It's got a bunch of campsites, and then it's actually got 2 cabins and a church on it. Rundown church, but it's got 2 cabins.
Open up a wedding venue.
Yeah, pretty much. That could be something we actually utilize in the future. But yeah, we're pretty excited about this campsite. The second commercial property is actually another campsite, and that'll be in Texas, I think north of Dallas.
Nice.
That one is that's a big one. I'm working with this developer, and he's it's not totally 100% there yet, but in about 60 to 90 days, I think we'll be ready to launch the first 12 cabins out there. And he wants our company to pretty much manage the whole thing. But they've got a huge campsite. They've got different phases. They got, I think, like 50 to 100 RV pads. They've got like these amazing, unique stays there. Like not just tiny cabins and whatnot, but like they've got these like alien vessel type things that they bought over from like Taiwan and China. And then they've got those old Western cabins, wagons with the covered white, like from the Oregon Trail type thing. They've got, I think, like 20 of those. And so the way I see it, it's like a Cowboys and Aliens kind of thing. And yeah, they've got a whole venue there, a restaurant.
I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth right now, so I might get that information from you so I just can go by and look at it. Because I'm wondering, I'm sure it's a low of 100 out there right now. It's just getting mid-morning here, but how the Oregon Trail things would work in the summer.
Yeah, no, I'll be out there in October, Brenna. So maybe we can meet
That'd
up.
be cool.
And we can meet up at the campsite too and everything. So
Awesome.
cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you got really cool things going on. I want to take it a few steps back though, even because when you hear your story, like obviously you got started in more or less in terms of the fast-paced scaling and stuff in 2021. And fast forward 2 years, 2023, you got a huge portfolio, you got these cool campground projects you're working on, you got this multifamily stuff. It is a lot and it sounds awesome, but I know it didn't just happen overnight. So why don't we take a step back and let's talk about how did you get there and how did you set yourself up all these years prior with your fiscally responsible living and financial education so that when the opportunity came, you were able to pull that trigger and move fast. Because I think that's a huge thing, especially now people hear and see these things that sound a lot like overnight successes and nothing to take away from that. It's just what they don't see is the years and years typically of the hard work and preparation ultimately to get yourself in a position to be able to take advantage of those opportunities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, Kale. Even today is not easy, right? I still work a full-time W-2,
Right.
and we've got a one-year-old running around. We have like I mentioned to you guys earlier, we do also have another one on the way. I haven't even announced that yet, but whenever this podcast comes out, I'm sure it will happen. We've told most of our family and friends, but still. Anyhow, I would say over the past years, I think definitely learning about financial independence and like educating ourselves in personal finance has been a key factor. And again, investing from a position of financial strength to help us pursue a lot of this stuff. We do live our lives quite like in a minimalistic lifestyle, trying to cut out any things that are not essential or unnecessary, but still living a life where we're comfortable and having and setting our lives up for our kids, for my daughter. And I think it's learning how to navigate all this is definitely we don't have I would say we don't really have there's no playbook or guidebook for what you can do and how much you can do it. But I would say balance is key. And being able to juggle a lot of these things can sometimes be daunting. And remembering though that remembering your why, remembering your driver definitely does help. And I think you also have to be a tad bit obsessed with it in order to do some of this stuff. If you're just treating this as, oh, this is just like a side hustle and I'm not so passionate about it, then that's fine. But I think in order to scale like we did and to push through what we have done, you have to be a little bit obsessed with it. And sometimes being obsessed with something like that cannot be cannot have a good balance, essentially. And I think some of the things that, for me personally, that some of the challenges that I've gone through is like balancing that with health. I would say hasn't been the healthiest mentally and physically to have to juggle through all of this. But my wife and I have had a lot of recent talks about it, and like we're trying to like make sure that we have our own team and set up a bigger team. We have our own team now. Like I hired my first employee a couple months ago, and we're looking to expand that so that we can keep growing and they can take the majority of it because a lot of this time, us working in the business ourselves it's been taking up a lot of time. And I think helping grow our team has helped with that. And then obviously trying to spend more time just like being present with our daughter and being healthy and finding ways to move around because I'm like sedentary here in my office chair sometimes. But yeah, so yeah, I think that balance is key there. Yeah, for those listeners who are trying to figure out like how can I get from point A to like that point, it's gonna take time and it's gonna take some sacrifices. You have to be a little bit obsessed with it, but make sure you balance it with the rest of your life. Yeah, and that's my biggest takeaway with that.
Yeah.
Do you have any long-term real estate?
I still have my long-term rentals. We have property managers for that,
Yeah,
and I speak to them like once a year.
that's nice.
So yeah. But we did actually sell one of our long-term rentals. And we were planning on 1031 exchanging that over to another short-term rental. But things actually didn't pan out for that 1031 exchange, and we decided to just take the money.
Do you so I know you're in short-term rentals and then now you're moving into the commercial sector. Do you like short-term rentals so far better, or do you like the commercial avenue better?
I like them both. I think short-term rental is a very active business, as you and I both know. And so we like having our active business and growing that. But on the commercial side, albeit I do have the commercial campgrounds and that will also be active. But as Kale mentioned earlier, we also ventured into large multifamily. We recently co-GP'd on a 111 A- class unit in Dallas, Texas, about 6 months ago. And we decided to utilize that to help park some of our money into more passive plays so that they can continue to grow from us. Because at the end of the day, after all this, guys, you just want your money to keep making money for you while you continue to live your life. We'll always keep working, but we'll always have that option to work is what we're trying to strive for.
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with Jake and Gino, right? I love what they call it, like baby money soldiers, right?
Yeah.
All your baby money soldiers out there making money for you. And you don't want to kill off those baby money soldiers prematurely by living beyond your means and that type of thing, because that's just going to stunt. Oops, my microphone just fell. That's just going to stunt your ability to grow. And like I mentioned before, put you in that position where you can take advantage of opportunities when they come. And that's something I wanted to highlight because I know you lived that or have that type of mentality with the way you live your life. Still, you mentioned you started out house hacking, and I know just from listening to other things about you and stuff of how you live fiscally responsibly. You always have a side hustle going on, and you're not driving a Lamborghini out there yet. And so if you can just touch on that a little bit and like, where did you get that mentality from? If you can, that, and why is that important to have that financial education from the get-go if you want to be able to scale and grow?
Yeah, let's see here. I think it was when I was working in my W-2 and I was traveling a lot. And I was driving, when I would say traveling, I was driving everywhere. I think during these long drives, I decided to start listening to this podcast, Pockets. And I started listening to these other financial podcasts, independence podcasts. I learned a lot about the FIRE community,
Right.
Financial Independence Retire Early community. And that community really gave me a lot of insight into personal finance. I know a lot of investors can attribute their first education or first start into this industry utilizing or from Rich Dad Poor Dad by Rob Kiyosaki. And I was one of those folks who also began to listen to that book, and I listened to it 3 times over Audible when I first went through it because I knew it was a game changer. But real estate investing was definitely something I wanted to do, but I knew that personal finance was also a big part of it. Right. And I was always, my parents, my family, they've always been in the Dave Ramsey side of things. And I love Dave Ramsey. I do. Better than I deserve. Dave Ramsey, he is, the way he approaches money problems, I know that he's one of the best folks and one of the biggest personalities in the personal finance space from paying off debt in that perspective. But I think growing wealth, take both sides of the coin. And I took little bits and pieces from what I learned from the FIRE community and real estate investors. And I took a little bits and pieces from what I was learning from Dave Ramsey and their community and others, and try to fit that into our own bucket here. And we learned that the top 3 things that you should cover in terms of your biggest expenses for a average American family is housing, transportation, and food. And so housing, we were covering that by house hacking. My wife and I, we had moved in together. We had house hacked for about a year before she realized she didn't want to live with other people. But we continued to rent out the rooms, and we live elsewhere. But house hacking was a big one. And for our first year and a half of our marriage, it really helped us a lot. Secondly, transportation. We actually lived really close to where our jobs were. If you can somehow not have to make that 31 hour, an hour and a half commute to and from your work, that saves a lot of money and time, a lot of gas as well. And we decided to actually intentionally get positions that were within less than a 7-mile radius from where we were living. And then third, food. We created a budget for literally everything, right? At this time, we were also in the middle of paying off our student loans. Again, $147,000 in 14 months. We were very adamant about where each dollar went. Right. And so for food, we shopped at places like Aldi's and other places where we would get things in bulk and shop, and we had specific strict budgets about all of this. At one point, I think we were saving, I think we were doing $50 a week on groceries.
$50 a week?
$50 a week on groceries. And then we had, I think, 35 each for restaurants or elsewhere outside of like groceries. So $50 now I know is no way can you do that, right? But back in, I think, 2019, that was actually doable, especially if you were shopping someplace in Aldi's. Back then, a dozen eggs were like 89 cents at that spot. Yeah, I'm doing all these and making that decision to live that type of lifestyle. We didn't really see it as sacrifice. We saw it as, hey, we were making these intentional moves in order to, again, invest and be at a point of financial strength so that we could not worry about just having to live our basic needs and having to have a roof over our head and food in our bellies. Being able to budget gave us extreme insight into where each of our dollar went, where our money was going. And so if we were going to be investing, we knew that money was going to be parked specifically for investing as well. And so we did all that. We were both working full-time jobs. And while paying off student loans at this time, I had decided to venture into other things. I started tutoring as well, tutoring kids in math who were trying to get into STEM academies. We had started a t-shirt and jean design business online, which failed miserably because I didn't know anything about marketing and campaigns, but I learned a lot from it. And then later on, actually in 2021, I had started an e-commerce store. And I was doing like fulfillment by Amazon, FBA, FBM, drop shipping. And although that went okay for about a year, the margins were very small in e-commerce.
Right.
And so we decided to just drop that and go to full-time real estate investing for our investments.
What I'm hearing from is, which I feel like a lot of people should do, because I hear on a lot of my Zoom meetings and stuff, some people are like so anti Dave Ramsey and they're like, no, we're going to do Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that's the only way to go. And my whole mentality, it sounds exactly like yours. I'm right in the middle because when it comes to getting rid of debt that's not making you money to make more money, I'm not about paying off my primary residence so I don't have any debt. I don't believe in that part. I do believe that you need to leverage your debt to make money for you. But I did the same thing. Like I wish I could have turned back time and done it differently because I didn't know the housing market was about to explode. But I sold my primary residence and just to pay off my student loans at the end of 2019. And that was part of the Dave Ramsey thing. While I'm sitting here saying, okay, the next money that I'm going to get, I'm going to put that into a piece of real estate or something like that. And I think what's important for listeners to hear his story is you need to take bits of information from different avenues, such as Dave Ramsey, such as Robert with the Rich Dad Poor Dad, and put them together to make your own personal plan. It's not one way. It's not like my way or the highway or whatever. I think you need to do your research, learn about all different aspects of saving, paying off debt versus not paying off debt to see what will make you the most money.
And personal finance is just that. It's personal, folks. And I think that's a big part of the confusion for a lot of people. They're like, oh, wait, hey, Dave Ramsey said this, though. Or, hey, according to Pockets or Rich Dad Poor Dad, they say this other thing. Honestly, you got to do what works for you. Personal finance, again, is just that. It's personal. You're going to have your own avenue, your own customized approach for it. And so did we. And that's how we were able to get to where we are today as well.
Yeah. And one sets up the other. So that's the way I look at it is the Dave Ramsey mentality can set you up to jump into the Robert Kiyosaki mentality, so to speak. One builds the foundation, the other builds the building, so to speak. Exactly. That's the way I look at it. Like before changing my mindset and getting into the investing mode and Robert Kiyosaki's mentality mode, I was very much like you, followed the Dave Ramsey thing even before I knew who Dave Ramsey was. He did house hacking. I still house hack. I'm 39 with 3 kids. We rent out a room in our house. I've never not house hacked, honestly, not in my entire life. Never not house hacked. I've lived below my means, budgeting, like you said, driving older cars, buying everything used. Although I did buy a new car recently, but I rent that out. I rent it out on Turo.
That's amazing. I love that.
Makes me money.
Yeah.
I always had that mindset of everything I buy to me is an asset, or how can I make it an asset? So I used to flip cars. Every car that I would buy, I'd find it, make sure it was a good deal, drive it for a couple of years, and then make sure I could sell it for at least the same or more than I bought it for.
Look at that. That's awesome. On the topic of cars and transportation, like I mentioned earlier, along with, at least for Patricia and I, my wife, along with trying to live closer to where we work, we also bought these cars. We bought used cars on auto auctions.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys ever been to an auto auction. It can be a little bit daunting. They're just like, there's people out there like Kale who are used to flipping cars, who like know what to look for in a vehicle. And me going in there new, at least for my first purchase, and being 21 years old and like looking for a used car. I went to this auto auction and just eavesdropping on people like Kale. I'm like, I'll be asking them, like, hey, what do you guys think about this car? And they're looking under the hood. You can't drive the car at an auto auction, right? So typically they have the auction on Sunday. On Saturday, you're able to go to the lot and look at all the cars. And so that Saturday, I spent a few hours turning on the car, looking under the hood, taking pictures, writing down the VIN numbers. And then later that night, I take my top 10 and I search them online to make sure they have a clear title. And then from there on Sunday morning, I've got my list of 10. I've got my blue book values. I know I'm not going to be raising my hand for over this price. And so I had a whole game plan for it. Come Sunday morning, everything goes out the window, and there was a specific car that I wanted. And they just kept raising my hand like, cool, because like they're going so fast, and like they're doing this like online auction at the same time. So they're saying, oh, there's a bid online going at the same time there's a bid physically going on. So sometimes you're like, oh, that's shady. You don't know if it's like real or not. But I'm just like, I need that car. I need that car. That's how I ended up getting my 2007 Toyota Corolla. And then a year and a half ago, we ended up selling that. And I upgraded. And people were like, Vinci, it's about time you upgraded. You have a 2007 Toyota Corolla. And that thing works wonders. Like we had, I think, 250,000 miles on it, but it was working amazing. But I traded in for a newer car. And I was so proud when I told when I told like everyone about it, my friends, that we finally got a newer car. Also got from an auto auction. It was a 2011 Honda CRV.
There we go.
Yeah, we got a little bit bigger car for the baby coming. So
yeah,
I need to look into this auto auction. This sounds exciting now. Yeah. But I don't even know if you open the hood, I'd be like, what is that windshield wiper fluid? And they'd be like, no, that's
is that oil
goes.
Be there?
Yeah, it looks good and rotted out or something. I don't know.
We need to call Kale and FaceTime with him while we're out there.
Yeah.
I know nothing about cars. I'm like, I see a leak under the car. I'm like, oh my gosh. And my husband's like, that's just the air conditioning fluid or like the condensation. I'm like, okay.
I tell you, I learned about cars because I was too cheap and too poor to take them to a mechanic. So you learn
That's true. They charge you so much.
Oh yeah. I became a backyard mechanic growing up. So,
oh, that's awesome, man.
Well, but I wanted to spend some time on that because I think it's important that people hear that and see that successful people like yourself still live financially responsibly and prudently and below your means, that you don't need to do the keeping up with the Joneses thing and follow that trap, really, that most people fall into in their life and end up paycheck to paycheck, even if they make a lot of money. And, it may be sacrifices. Like you said, it is a personal thing. So you got to see what you're comfortable with. Not everybody may be comfortable with the house hacking thing. And if you're not, then, okay, then figure out some other ways. But at the end of the day, you've got to make some type of sacrifices if you really want to step out and push yourself forward. And the way I look at it is that human beings are extremely adaptable, and something that may be a sacrifice now, you will be accustomed to it and it will become a new normal for you and will no longer be felt so much as a sacrifice. Driving an older car, yeah, you might think that sucks for a little bit, but you know what? After a little bit of time, that's just going to be what it is, right? You're going to stop caring about what type of car you drive or, that you don't have a brand new car. It really doesn't matter. Or what type of house you live in or this or that, the other thing. So I just encourage people to really give thought and consideration to that. If you do want to really set yourself up to be in a good position financially, start thinking about what you can do on the back end to live below your means and be responsible to set yourself up so that when opportunities do come your way, you can now pull the trigger and really take off on things. So that's why I really wanted to dig in and spend a little bit of time on that, because I don't think people look into that enough, or I don't think people are really willing to sacrifice enough, frankly.
I want to make a point on that before we move on, because I think you were mentioning a lot of stuff and it makes me think of people are like keeping up with the Joneses and all of that stuff. The big flex is being able to spend time with your family and not have to work that W-2 job. But there's the people, they're always like me. And I've been there before, so I know it. And I had to become very honest with myself. And it says, I'll be happy when I have this.
Right.
I'll be happy when I get that new car, and I'm going to be. But if you ask yourself, okay, did that change your life after you got that very expensive car or, that house? You're still, if you're unhappy with where you're at, you're not going to buy something to make you happy. But yeah, you might go on an expensive vacation. You might be happy for that week, but then you get back and it's the same thing. Or that car might wear off new in 2 months and you're back to that same mentality. So you have to I think a lot of people, the reason why they fail is because they're not honest with themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know for some folks, they're like car heads, right? Like their passion are cars.
Right.
They'll talk all day, every day about like vehicles. And if that's the case, then figure out a way that your assets can pay for that, for those liabilities.
Exactly.
Or you can turn your liability into an asset, like what Kale's doing here, right? Buying that nicer new vehicle, but he's putting it on Turo and making money from that, right? While still being able to enjoy the benefits of it. So I think Brenna, that's such a good thing to say, because a lot of people, again, they don't really realize, hey, a lot of us who are in this industry, or a lot of us getting into this mode where on Instagram or social media, you may see all the glamour, you may see all the good things or the highlight reels of your life or of your business. But in order to get there, there's a lot of heartache, and there's also a lot of sacrifices that you have to go through. And you have to be really intentional about the way you live as well, for you to keep being able to provide for your family, to be able to keep running your business. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that word, because I actually had it written down here, but intentionality. Like the whole time you were speaking, that's exactly what jumped out at me, was intentionality. Everything you did was with intention, right? The way you budgeted, the way you lived your life, the way you disciplined yourself to pay down that debt. And it just reminded me also of, I think, you're familiar with him, Lenny the Boss, right? We had him on previously. And one of the things that we had brought up is because Lenny's full of energy and positivity, right? And he brought up the same thing in that we said he lives a practice life, which is another way of saying intentional life. And that's how he maintains that positivity. Like, it doesn't just come to him, right? He has a very disciplined way of how he sets his day up and how he maintains that positivity. So it goes into all these different areas. So I think that's crucial is, you got to live with intention, and you got to have a purpose for why you're doing what you're doing. And Brenna, what you were talking about, I think segues us perfectly into perhaps talking about the faith aspect a bit, because the money can't buy happiness thing, that phrase is out there. And I think everybody knows it's true, right? But I think everybody still wants to deny it because we are still creatures of the flesh, and our fleshly desires oftentimes influence us more than our godly desires.
We'll say material things I don't think will ever make you happy. However, I will preface that I think I will pay good money for very good food, and that does make me happy. And I don't regret it. I don't, like, 3 months later, I'm like, man, I wish I didn't have that really good pizza. Like, I'm fine with that. So I think I was talking about material things, so I don't want people to confuse it, because I do think food is a way to be happy too.
Hey guys, it's Brenna Carl, CEO and co-founder of The Mortgage Shop. When I'm not spending my time searching for the best pizza in town, working out, well, because of pizza, or fighting sharks, as Kale likes to say, I spend my time educating clients on the best investment products that will help them build generational wealth, and making sure their loan process is as smooth as warm butter on a piece of toast. Call us today to get started with your investment journey at 800-816-7982, or, to talk more about pizza. Talk to you soon.
Amen to that.
Okay.
You can't be having those big meals on that $50 a week Aldi budget. But let's explore that, and let's talk about that a little bit. Vinci, obviously you're a Christian. Why don't you take us a little bit on your faith journey? Did you grow up in a Christian household, or how did you come to know Christ, and when did that become personal for you?
For sure. I guess a bit of a testimony for us. I know we grew up predominantly Catholic, actually. As a Filipino, I'm full-blooded Filipino. I was actually born in the Philippines as well. I swam here in 95. I'm just kidding on the swimming part.
Yeah, I was just, I hope we want to dive in.
But let's see here. We came here in the States in the 90s, and predominantly most Filipinos are Catholic, and we grew up in a Catholic household. But some things that happened with my dad. Excuse me. There was some things that went down at school, and my dad had gone to jail. And we lived a man, we did not come from a good environment. I would say that. The place that we were living in as well was extremely ghetto. I would say that. When you're a kid, you don't know that. To you, just that's just home. But looking back now, it's like there was a lot of dangerous stuff that like we had gone through, unsafe conditions and whatnot. A family of 6 living in a 1-bedroom apartment was home to me and was the norm to me.
Yeah.
But we didn't realize that. And we realized the situation that we were really in growing up. And I appreciate my parents so much for getting us through it all. And yeah, I think in the beginning, a lot of things had happened. My dad had gone to jail for just a little bit, for just a little while, for really protecting my siblings and I. And I guess to a little bit more explicit about it, some people at our elementary school, because we were in elementary at that time, they were bullying one of my siblings, and they were beating him up and making fun of him and whatnot. My dad decided to defend him and tell him to pretty much stand up for himself and all that. He had decided to tell my brother to go ahead and do something about it. My brother went and tried to sock the kid and try to like punch him or whatnot, just try to show him some self-defense.
Mhm.
And him, the bully, and a bunch of his friends jumped.
We lost the audio, Vinci.
Put yourself on mute.
Oh,
There we go.
okay. Which part did I leave off?
We
Jump.
lost
A second ago?
jumped.
Oh, okay. That's the suspense, actually. I did that on purpose.
It sounds like
I'm just kidding. So he got jumped along with the bully, some of his friends. And my dad actually got in the middle of that. He got in between them when he saw that happen. And I was all there. I was like in, I think, 3rd grade or something like that. And he got in the middle of that. And so that's how he ended up getting charged for something, but he wasn't guilty. And so he was released. But that time frame, that a time frame between when my dad was in jail and between the verdict and everything, like it was a scary time. And that was a turning point for our family. My dad had started going to, as part of, I guess, what was the verdict, my dad went to anger management class. His anger management class was led by a pastor.
Hmm.
And that pastor, my dad began learning a lot from there. He brought us as well, sometimes to his classes, and like just his family, the little kids and stuff. And then, yeah, we founded a local Christian church and we started going to it. And to me, like that was just, I'm like, what is this? This is completely different from Catholicism. And growing up, and then from there, yeah, I was still like 3rd, 4th grade, or 4th or 5th grade when we began going to a Christian church. So I was about, I think, around 10 at that time. And then from there, just growing up in that faith, in that Christian environment with those people, I think that really set the stage for our values growing up and the way we would treat others, with the way we would treat other people. And so, yeah, growing up in a Christian household then, but still remembering and understanding that it wasn't like day and night. It wasn't like overnight that all this stuff went away. There was still a lot of issues that we were working out as a family. And I think later on, when my sibling and I became adults, we began understanding like what we really went through, and then forgiving our parents for some of the things that had happened, but also truly appreciating them also for all the sacrifices and all the things that they have done to bring us to where we are now. And God, God has a plan for us, but sometimes like we don't know what that plan is, and we think we know what we want, but He'll make us go through a lot of trials and tribulations for us to really understand like where we need to be. And that's what happened with me and my family. So let me pause right there.
were you raised in California?
In Southern California, yeah.
Okay. I like that you say it wasn't overnight because, again, I feel like people here coming from a troubled past and then getting saved and everything's perfect. It's not. It's a walk, literally walk with God every single day to try to be as close to godliness as you can. And there's some days that you definitely fall off the wagon, and there's some days that you're better than others, but it's never just, oh, now I'm saved. Like that person's perfect and they don't have anything to work on. It's always a constant work. And like you said, I like your honesty of we had to work to forgive, because that it's hard, because you can say you forgive somebody, but if you're still holding that animosity, it's so hard to just let that go. Like you want to forgive somebody, but you can't really until you let go of that anger and that animosity. And so I like that you say that, because it is a lot of people paint that picture of everything's great and roses and we're a perfect Christian family. And it's never like that. Actually, I think the people that do act like that are probably the worst ones, the worst problems.
Yeah. Well, again, I always, whenever we talk about the trials and tribulations and sacrifice and suffering, I always look back to some of the fathers of the faith, so to speak. And the examples that really jump out to me are, I always harken back to Joseph. Joseph and his story is like one of the most powerful for me, because you look at the suffering, long-term suffering that kid went through, being attempted murder from his brothers, then sold into slavery, then imprisoned incorrectly, then helping these people out with interpreting their dreams, asking them not to forget him. And then, 3 years later, remember you. But all of that was to set him up for and prepare him and refine him to be the leader that he turned out to be. And another one is David, King David, the man after God's own heart, the guy who committed some of the most atrocious sins out there, murder, adultery. But he suffered. That guy suffered like crazy. Look how messed up his family was. One of his sons raped one of his daughters. His sons tried to kill him. Right? He was on the run. Yeah, had a super difficult life. Even when he was anointed king, when Saul was still reigning, what happened then? Saul tried to kill him.
Tried to kill him too.
I just had one thing after another. And it always perplexed me for so long of, how is he a man after God's own heart? What does that mean? Because when I look at it on the surface, like, this guy was messed up. Seriously. But what it was, and scripture does say it clearly, if you read it, was that he was considered a man after God's own heart, because even after every time he messed up and sinned, he truly repented. And that's what it meant. That's what it means to be after God's own heart, is God gives us grace. He gives us the grace for forgiveness, but there's a responsibility on our end too, which is the repentance, the true repentance. And that's the distinction that I think we fall short on, myself very much included, fall short on, of being truly repentant of our sins. So those are just things that the two big stories and characters that I always think about big time when it comes to trials and tribulations. And what does being a Christian really look like? It's not the perfect life, like you mentioned, Brenna. It's living a life of sacrifice and trials and tribulations, and having a big responsibility to forgive and be repentant of the sins that we inevitably commit.
I wish we had examples, though, of my sister pushed me or something and I forgave her, because looking at Joseph and what he went through, if that happened to me, I wish a heifer would. I don't think I'm that Christian to be able to be like, oh yeah, I forgive. Now that stuff will go down that day if that happened in real life. So that's a crazy example story. So I just don't know if that happened in today's society, I couldn't. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
But see, that's the thing. And I'll get off the soapbox here shortly, but it's because I just read through this book. It's called Hearts of Fire, which I think I mentioned it recently on another one, but it's by the Voice of the Martyrs. And it gives a story of several, specifically women, who in today's day and age around the world are going through much, much worse things than Joseph, terrible things. But the point of it is that none of them, just like you said, Brenna, none of them felt prior to getting into their situations that they would be able to handle it. It always came about that when they were in the midst of it, God gave them the strength to deal with their situations. And I pray that for myself too, because just like you, like thinking of myself, if I were in those situations, heck no, are you kidding me? I would be terrible. And so I just pray that God, I pray it doesn't happen to me, I really don't want it to. If it did happen to me, God, give me the grace to be able to deal with that.
Overcome it. Yeah.
Overcome it and to still give you glory throughout the trial.
And see, how many siblings did you say you had?
So there's 4 of us, including myself.
Okay.
Yeah. And
And then are y'all still like in connection? Do you still talk with everybody?
Yeah, we're all extremely close. I
Okay.
think through trauma and
Yeah.
and through one time, but yeah, we are all very close. And yeah, we're all in California. I think let's see here, the three of us are down here, and then one of my brothers is up in NorCal. But I wanted to touch upon the subject you guys were mentioning there because I think it's also you also have to realize like everyone we've all sinned, and that goes back to one of a favorite verse of mine as well, Romans 3:23. I've brought it up here and make sure I'm reading it correctly. But for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. And so essentially that's letting us know that everyone has sinned and we all are going to fall short of God's standard. But God in his grace, he makes us right in his sight. And I think knowing that like we all have sinned and we're all not going to be perfect is gonna it's something that we have to make sure we place on ourselves, that we understand because sometimes we're too harsh on ourselves as well. And a lot of people get tied up thinking that like they have to be perfect or they have to showcase that this one thing or another. But honestly, we've all sinned. And no matter how perfect you think you are, like we've all sinned and we're falling by God's glory already. But through his grace, we're able to be saved. And
Vinci,
yeah,
I feel like I love that you're still, I could see your past still playing into your present of being that conservative with your money, and your vulnerability I really admire because you're talking about your past and how it was difficult, but I still see it in your like life today because you see a lot of people that we've all seen them. We're in the real estate business every day. We see these people that come from, they didn't know what they were doing. And then now they try to be like this big guru and act like everything,
mhm,
just like the people that, were Christians and say that everything's hunky dory. They act like they have no struggles or it's not hard. And I like that you are being able to express, hey, I didn't know what I was doing. I did a lot of research. I'm here now, but I'm still living below my means because that's not what it's all about. And so I really respect and admire that.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Echo that. Yeah. What I love is that you're very humble, right? You're very humble. For somebody as successful as you are, you're extremely humble, which I think was a great character quality. And I'm sure your Christian faith has something to do with that, your upbringing and everything. So I think that's, it's just more important, more and more important in today's society, how everything is of, like we talked about previously, highlight reels and everything like that. To be okay with not, what am I trying to say? To not shout everything from the rooftops, so to
Right.
speak,
Yeah.
and be okay with just living your life. So I really respect that about you and appreciate that. And thank you for sharing everything that you did share with us today. Because again, I think it's just the more we can open up about what life truly is like behind the scenes, whether from an entrepreneurial standpoint or from a Christian standpoint or
I love, yeah.
whatever, focusing, understanding that everybody's got some type of challenges. Everybody's got some type of thing that they're working through. Not everybody's got it all together. We're all still
Yeah.
trying to figure it out as we go and grow. So I think you're just a great example of that as well.
I think also like one of and I appreciate your kind words, Kale, and also Brenna. I think one of the biggest struggles like us entrepreneurs or us folks in this industry have is also like being content
Yes.
with the way things are. And I think the Bible talks a lot about being content
Right.
and not conforming right, with the world, but being transformed by renewing of your mind. It's being content is a big factor, and I think people sometimes maybe even mix up being content with wanting to be what's the word for it? It's on the tip of my tongue, but like wanting to actually create something for your family and doing something about the opportunities that you have and the strengths that you have and being able to actually share that with the world too. Being able to share a message like this with other people is not something that other podcasts or other people are doing enough of. And so that's one of the things I love about the Fit Investor, about this thing that you guys have created, because not enough people talk about their faith,
Mm.
right? They talk about maybe their financial journey and their hardships and maybe some of the personal things that they've gone through. But our soul here is actually the biggest question here. It's the biggest thing that like we all have to really be working on. And our spiritual journey is more important, I believe, than any of this other stuff. I do believe that I fall short of that I could do better and I could be better for my family, be a better father figure, and be a better leader in our household. for this kind of stuff, and I'm trying to be. And I think I'm really glad being able to surround myself with people though, like you guys,
Right.
who are also trying to be in that space and also trying to live a life like this. And that's
Right.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's the important thing is just, it goes along with everything, right? Is community and who you surround yourself with.
exactly.
The average of the 5 people you spend the most time with is who you're going to be, which is
Yes,
so
exactly.
no matter what it is. If we are just hanging out with entrepreneurial people where all we talk about is business and business, that's where our mind is going to gravitate and that's where our focus is going to be. And that's probably where we're going to have the most success, right? We just hang around with other people in the church or people of faith. That's probably going to be our focus and where we have the most success. So it's trying to, I think as everybody is, right, the constant struggle, we're trying to find that balance. And how do we do that? Because we all live in the world. We all have to deal with the challenges that are in it. And we all have certain dreams and desires and things that we're trying to pursue. And hopefully they're in accordance with God's will. But
Yeah,
there's so much that we all have on our plates. How can we live that balanced life? And that's what we're all trying to struggle with and figure out. And that's one of the big reasons that we started this podcast, is to try to learn from people like yourself. Some people do some aspects really well. Some people do other aspects really well. How can we blend them? Just like we were talking about with the Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki mindsets. How can we take bits and pieces of all these different journeys and stories and work them into our lives and apply them to try to help ourselves live a more balanced life? And that's what we're all striving for, right? To find that contentment, so to speak, I think. So
exactly. 100%.
yeah. Cool, man. I really appreciate your time and sharing these stories with us. I think we got a lot of value, a lot of really openness, which I appreciate. And to try to wrap things up here, we like to ask our guests for 3 actionable or practical tips that we can leave our audience with based on what we discussed here today.
Yeah, absolutely. One tip I would always say is a lot of people think knowledge is power. I don't believe that. I believe application of knowledge is power. So if you can read all the books and listen to all the podcasts and watch all the videos you want to, but if you are not applying that knowledge, if you're not actually taking action, then you are essentially doing nothing, really. You need to apply that knowledge. You need to keep going that. I know that first step is always key, just like educating yourself, but you gotta take action. So if you're listening to this, take action. Let's see. Your second tip I would say is we talked about having a balance. We talked about like how balance is key. I think trying to figure out your timeline and your time frame for what you do and when you do things is going to be important. For myself, between my technically 9 to 5 or really 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. for me, I try to fit in as much as I can between that time frame, because after that, it's family time. And so I'm trying to be very intentional. Like we talked to here a lot about being intentional with your finances, being intentional with your faith. I think it's very important to be intentional with your time as well. Understanding where your priorities are. For me, after my 5 or 6 p.m., for the next couple hours there, it's family time. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm trying to be present with my wife and my kid, and just being there with them keeps me balanced, because it's easy to start like looking at your phone and start responding to messages or taking calls in between that time. But that's going to take time away from really what's important here, and what's important to me, and be intentional with the time. And then third tip, man, I'm thinking about this as based on everything that we've talked about as well. But I guess third tip is let's see here. Huh. Let's talk about faith a little bit. We talked about being intentional with time and being intentional as our second tip there, but I would say faith is your spiritual journey and your faith is going to be key to a lot of this, because it's going to help with when times are tough in this business, and when you're facing a lot of struggles or choices where like you don't know what to do. Your faith and is going to be a key factor into all this. And so working on your faith, working on that, making sure that you pick up your Bible, you read your daily verses. I typically utilize this Bible app, and every morning it's got this like devotions on there that I use. I mean, I love it because it's like I think like less than 10 minutes, less than 5 minutes even. And you listen to a little bit of stuff, you get to do your prayer and devotions. And that always keeps me grounded in the morning. and it helps me set the tone for the rest of the day as well. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. And in honor of Brenna, who she had to step out here, but
Right.
Brenna's favorite question is, what is your favorite pizza and from where?
Oh man, pizza and from where? Man, okay, so I talked about my long-term rentals in Chicago, and yeah, it's got to be the deep dish pizzas that they have over there. We went to probably 3 different places, and all of them were all good. But if you've never had deep dish Chicago pizza from Chicago, you got to go check it out. Definitely the best pizza I've ever had. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still thinking about it today.
Very good. Very good. Thank you again. We'll appreciate your time. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Join us next week.
Thank you, y'all. Peace.